everyone. Thank you all for joining us today for the Branding and Packaging webinar. This webinar is brought to you by the Food and Beverage Business Accelerator Program. My name is Emily Page, and I'm a food scientist with Perennial Food and Agriculture. We are Nova Scotia's only development agency with a focus on agriculture and seafood. We offer services in food safety, agriculture extension, mobile wine bottling, and analytical testing of cannabis foods and beverages. Our innovation team works with clients on product development, process improvement, nutritional labeling, and shelf life determination. Today's guest presenter is Sunil Sarwal from the Small Monsters. Sunil is a brand strategist and packaging designer with over 20 years of experience in the consumer packaged goods industry. He works with creative food and drink companies across North America to build innovative brands. With consumers busier and more stressed than ever, new products need to go beyond a pretty package if they want to succeed in the world of COVID-19. We will have some time for questions at the end, so if you have any questions, please use the Q&A button to submit them, and we will answer them at the end. We are going to launch a poll to kick things off. We just want to know who's here with us today. And with that, I'm going to hand it off to you, Sunil.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Emily. I appreciate that. So hi, everybody. My name is Sunil Sarwal. Like Emily said, I'm a brand strategist and a consumer packaged goods packaging designer. And what that means is that I help food companies to connect with their markets so that their products sell better. So right now there's a poll going out because we want to find out how many of you are food entrepreneurs, how many of you are just starting out and don't have a product on the market yet. And those of you who are in that position, this is a really good talk for you to be in. I think you're going to get a lot out of it. For those of you who are in your first 2 or 3 years, also a really good spot for you. There might be some things in here you're going to say like, oh, I wish I'd learned that a few years ago. But there's going to be the Q&A, like Emily said afterwards, which I think will be really helpful. So we'll get started on the talk. And you've probably all heard that you've got about 3 seconds for your package on a shelf to grab somebody's attention, to catch their eye, to hook them, and to get them to pick up that product. But 3 seconds, that's really kind of in the world from before COVID. Right now, it's way more stressful. You know, you've got your mask, you've got regulations, there's arrows on the floor. And if you imagine a customer coming in and they've got their shopping list and they're really stressed out and they're probably a little bit anxious and they're looking for maybe that certain pasta that their partner really likes and they can't find it, and there's people all around and their kid is crying because they really want that box of Oreos and they can't find that pasta, and now maybe there's some guy coming the wrong way down the aisle and he doesn't have his mask up over his nose, and that customer just walked right by your beautiful package. They didn't even notice it. What's happening in COVID, what we're seeing is that customers aren't buying new products because they're just not seeing them. They're going for what they know. So big stores like Sobeys, like Superstore, they've pretty much stopped buying a lot of new products because they know these things just aren't even being seen. So you've got to find a better way to stand out and to get noticed if you're going to survive in this kind of new shopping environment. So when you're starting a food business, it's pretty tough. You know, there's a lot of things to learn. You've got to figure out if you need a co-packer. You've got to try to find a co-packer that has minimums below 50,000. You know, do you need investors? Do you need listing fees? And all of these things. You know, there's just so much to learn. You've got so many balls to juggle, so many moving pieces to put in place. And usually somewhere near the end of all of that, you decide, okay, I need packaging. You hire a graphic designer. You look at the fonts, the colors, photos, you put it together something nice. And that's not the way to do it. It's not a good process. Sorry, just 1 second. So this is a terrible statistic. 80% of new food companies actually fail in the first 3 years. If you're in the natural food section, like alternative foods or vegan foods, that 80% number actually jumps up to 94%. So it's a pretty rocky ride out there for new food companies. So me, I work with a lot of small and medium-sized companies, companies with, say, a gross revenue of around $1 million. I also work with some really large companies in the tens of millions up into the billions of dollars. And there's a process that these big players use to launch their products to make sure that they succeed. So in this talk, what I'm going to show you is the trade secrets that we use with those big companies so that you can apply those same things to your company so that instead of being part of the 80% that fail, you can be part of the 20% that succeed. So how do they do it? How do these big companies make sure that their launches work? What they do is they connect with their market. And the way to connect is through a brand. Now, you hear that word used a lot in a lot of different sectors, and it means something different in every place. In the consumer packaged goods sector, the way we use the word brand, it's the way that the public feels about you, about your company, and about your product. So it's the total of the emotions that people have about you. So what shapes a brand? Like what shapes those emotions? There's a lot of different things that can go into it. So there's the personality, for instance, that you might express through the words and the tone of voice that you use on your website or your advertising. And then there's all the graphic design, you know, the colors, the images, and the design on your website, on your packaging, and all of those things are under your control. There's also the values that you express through your own actions. So for instance, Patagonia has positioned itself as an environmentally responsible company. But at the same time, instead of just saying all of these things, they also reflect that in their actions through the sourcing of materials, sourcing of suppliers, through donations to various groups. They're showing through their actions that they are an environmentally responsible company. It can also work the other way around. For instance, Kellogg's had a strike recently. A lot of employees were very, very unhappy with the working conditions, and Kellogg's actually locked most of those employees out and brought in temporary workers. And so through their actions, a lot of people ended up saying, you know what, I don't want to shop at Kellogg's. It changed the way that people felt about the brand through those actions. Other things that can affect the way people feel about your brand are customer service, reliability. For instance, somebody buys something and after a year or two it breaks. And also a lot of factors that are just outside of your control. For instance, supply chain issues. You can imagine somebody who really likes your product, but you're not able to get it on a shelf in their town. And so they go to the store maybe 3 or 4 times, they're not finding it and they get angry about it. And it's completely out of your control, but these are some of the factors that can end up then shaping the way they feel about your brand. So what's the point then of having a brand? It's because you become more than just a product. You become something that people feel that they can know, that they can relate to. It can build trust. Without a brand, you often end up just kind of competing on price. You know, somebody might reach for your product and notice that the one next to it is maybe 30 cents cheaper, and so they go for that. Or you might end up competing on features, like you can imagine a sports bar and it has 12 grams of protein, and then somebody reaches for the one next to it because it has 15 grams of protein. With a brand, though, you can create a loyalty that will get you past that. It also provides a very succinct sales pitch so that you can tell people what you're all about very quickly and very easily and very succinctly. And it also has the power to create enormous loyalty. One of the examples I like to use is Tesla. And if anybody here is a Tesla driver, I'm just going to apologize ahead of time. I used this example with a potential new client about a month ago. It turned out they were a Tesla driver. They never called me back. But what it is that Tesla has the highest customer satisfaction ratings of any of the major car manufacturers. People who have Teslas, they're very, very happy with them. At the same time, though, they also have the lowest car reliability ratings of any of the major manufacturers. So highest customer satisfaction, lowest reliability ratings. I can't imagine a company like Ford or Honda being able to get away with that kind of thing. The reason that Tesla owners are so happy with their cars, even though their cars are more likely to break down, is because of that brand, because of that magic that they've built up between the things. Tesla owners often want to feel like they're maverick creative tech geniuses, and the Tesla car helps them to feel that way and helps them to fulfill their own self-image, leaving them happy and satisfied even when the car itself doesn't. So that's some of the power of a brand. Okay, so we talked about how a brand helps you to connect to your market, but how do you actually do that? Like, what do you need to do? There's a lot of different ways. For instance, you can nowadays just use direct communication on social media. So one of the examples I like to use is La Croix or LaCroix, the drink. They reached out directly to social influencers on Instagram, on Facebook. They said, look, if you take photos of yourself with our product, we will send you more product. And it worked. And they would communicate, they would talk directly, and they would respond directly to people who were talking about La Croix. And doing that, they were able to build themselves into a category leader in a very competitive, very crowded sector. So direct communication on social media works quite effectively. Another way is by using emotions in your advertising, on your website, on your packaging. Emotions like humor, hope, anger, all of those can work really well to forge a connection with your audience. In the food category, we don't really use anger. It doesn't fit very well, but humor, for instance, can work really nicely. An example I often use is Oatly. And when I give this presentation in person and I can see everybody's faces, when I mention Oatly, I usually see quite a few smiles. And I like to pause and just point out that all of you people are smiling about milk that's made from oats. It's not really a funny thing, it's not a happy thing, and yet we all have these emotions about Oatly. And the reason is, of course, is because their ads are funny. Their packaging even is funny. And so they've created this connection as we think that they're a funny brand, and we have these emotions about oat milk. So you can see how it can work really nicely. Another way is by filling a need in society. So for instance, in a project that I did recently, we saw that a lot of people were looking for a sophisticated adult drink that they could have when they're out with their friends. That wasn't going to be a pop, it wasn't going to be a juice, but it wasn't alcoholic. And we were able to fill that need by giving them a product that would fit those criteria, and it was extremely successful. And then finally, another way, a trickier way, is by fulfilling an emotional need in people. So I'm just about to launch a product now where we're fulfilling the emotional need for togetherness, for closeness, for being with your friends, all of these things that we've kind of been lacking during this pandemic. So by fulfilling that emotional need, we're hoping to be able to really make a strong emotional connection with people and build a brand that people are just like, I love that. I'm not sure why, but I really love it. So all these different methods, all these different ways, what's the right method for you? That's where somebody like me, a branding specialist, would come in, because every product, every market, every sector is very different, and there's always going to be a different approach. There's a branding specialist named Marty Neumeier. He's done a lot of work for Apple. You've seen his work. And he has a really good phrase that I really like. He says that what we do right here is called bridging logic and magic. And I like to use that phrase a fair bit in my own work. So how would a branding specialist take your product and get started to make a brand? We'd start with research. We're going to look at who your market is, who your competition is, what you're currently doing. Is your market the right one? What's unique about your product? And what sort of trends are happening? What's the cultural context that your product exists in? So I'll show you some examples. This is some of the research that we did for a recent client. We looked at all their competition. What's their packaging? You know, what are they saying on social media? What are people saying about them? Where is it sold? What's the weight? All of these things. We get to get a really full picture of what's going on. We analyze their packaging, their social media, the website. We'll do a SWOT analysis, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, to see where they should go. We'll also do market positioning. So in this case, for instance, it was a vegan cheese. And now for like hundreds of years, when we said cheese, we meant dairy cheese, you know, cheese that came from cows. And then in the last few years, we started seeing like vegan cheese, fromage, alternative cheeses coming up. When we build a brand, though, we want to build it not for today, but for the next few years, next 2 years, 3 years, 5 years out. And what we're anticipating, what our research showed, is that those two lines are going to converge pretty soon. And we're going to call these things cheese, whether they're made from dairy or soy or nut or plants, no matter what. It all comes down to, say, a bacteriological fermentation process. All of these things will still be called cheese. So when we did the rebrand, we said we need to anticipate this and drop the fromage vegan cheese name and just call the product cheese. So market positioning is part of what we'll do when we create a brand. So then how do we put all of that together into something new? What you see here is the triangle for a consumer packaged goods brand. Now, if you've studied this already, you're going to look at this and you're going to say, hey, this isn't the normal one that I've seen before, and that's true. Personally, I don't find that the standard CPG triangle really works as well as it should. So this is one that I've developed myself that I use with my clients. And you can see the way it works is as you move up, you have levels of increasing connection. So you can build a brand around any one of those 4 points, but as you go up, the brand that you build connects more strongly. So at the bottom, you have a brand on the blue section, a brand that's built around product attributes. Basically, you're saying our product has this. For food, I don't really like to work at this level because there's often not an enormous difference between you and your competitors. In non-food, however, though, this can work really well. Dyson is a good example of a company that's built a very successful brand at this level. You know, they say our vacuums don't lose suction. This is just a product attribute. They've built a very successful brand around that. One level up, the green level, is product benefits. It's like, this is how those attributes help you. So you could build a brand here. So any brand, any company that says something like, this is part of a healthy lifestyle, that's what they're doing. They're at that product benefit level. In the yellow section, this is where I really like to play, emotional, aspirational benefits. So like, I want to be this. I want to be seen as this. Any kind of fitness company, they're often here. So when you see like these ads for like Nike or Lululemon, for instance, and you think, my life would be better, I'd be a better person if these were the products that I owned and I was more like this, that's where they are. This is where we call like lifestyle brands, for instance, in the emotional and aspirational benefits. And then the top level, this is the really hard one to do, is brand identification. This isn't where people are saying, this is who I want to be. This is where people start to say, this is who I am. And if you can be here and get your brand to connect at this level, you're going to have very, very loyal customers. So my favorite example of this is actually Apple, who did a beautiful job of being at this level. People who buy, say, like an iPad or an iPhone or an iMac, they're not going to usually do a comparison shop and look at a Microsoft machine or an Android phone. They're buying Apple because Apple is who they are. It reflects themselves and their values and how they see themselves. So it's brand identification at a very, very profound level. So these are customers that even if you make missteps, even if you're more expensive, these are customers you're never going to lose. So I'm going to walk you through an example of how that could look. We're going to imagine a made-up luggage company. So starting at the bottom in blue, if that luggage company was going to just build a brand around their product attributes, they might say, hey, our suitcases are made from super tough nylon, and we've got lots of great pockets. This can be tricky though. This is why I don't like playing in this at this level, is because another customer can come in, another company can come in and say, sure, super tough nylon is great, but we've got rich Corinthian leather. And suddenly you're stuck and you really need to pivot. When you go up a level though, product benefits, it gets a little more interesting because you can carve out more of a unique space. You can say, hey, with all those pockets, you find your stuff easier than ever. You get to the hotel, you open it, everything's neatly arranged. So you can build a stronger connection, a stronger, more compelling brand around the benefits. One level up from that, emotional and aspirational benefits, is when you get people who are saying, I want to be a world traveler. And the way to do that is to show ads of beautiful people in beautiful locations with your beautiful suitcase, and make people feel like, yeah, that's the kind of life that I want to have. I want to be that kind of a person. I want to buy this product to help me become this kind of a person. So that can be a very strong connection. And then finally, under brand identification, this is when people are saying, I'm a jet set traveler. This is the brand that I buy because, of course, it is the brand that I would buy. This is a lot harder to do and it can take a lot of time, but this is where, for instance, you would want to get your suitcase in a paparazzi photo with somebody like George Clooney. It's where you're going to use very expensive materials because travel is a luxury item and you want your suitcase to be seen as a luxury item. It's where you use very high-end looking advertising and so forth to build a kind of universe around your brand so that people understand that this is what these people are actually using and buying. So that's how you can build at different levels, a different type of brand, and where you're going to be at is really going to depend on your product, on your market, and what's going on there. So once you've done all of that, what do you do with that? How do you put it all together? You build a brand strategy. And there's a quote from Marty Neumeyer. So what goes into a brand strategy? There's 10 main components. You've got your brand purpose, your vision, your mission, and so on. I'm not going to go through all of these, and you don't have to develop all 10 of them. Sometimes some of them really jump out more strongly than others, depending on the solution that you've found. Sometimes we will develop 3 of them, 5 of them, 8 of them. It all depends. Every time it's a little bit different. I'm going to break some of these down for you though with examples so that you can see what they are. The first one is the brand purpose, and this one's pretty key. It's the explanation of why a company exists beyond just making a profit. So this example here is the brand purpose that I created for Vivo, which is a Nova Scotia company, last year, making a real food movement for people in the planet. So it's why they exist. It's usually going to be very, very high level. It's not going to talk about their product. It's not talking about what they're making. It's a very high level guide. Then there's the brand vision. And if the brand purpose is why they exist, the brand vision is all about what they do and for whom they're doing it. So it's like a guiding statement. So if a company wants to decide in the future, maybe we should build new lines, maybe we should expand into new markets, they can come back to their brand vision to see if it's true to what they're supposed to be doing. So this example here is the brand vision that I created for another Nova Scotia company called Sperry, which makes nutritional food supplements, meal replacements, I should say. Then you have the brand positioning, another part of the brand. And this is what makes your product different from others. So this is for a PEI company that I did 2 years ago. And they had a non-alcoholic beer and they were trying to compete against other non-alcoholic beers and not getting a lot of traction. So we positioned them instead with the alcoholic beers. And what we simply said was, hey, it's got all the advantages of an alcoholic beer, but none of the headaches, none of the hangover, none of the disadvantages. Just a little switch in the brand positioning, and it worked amazingly well. This is now their biggest seller by far. Then there's also the brand promise. And the brand promise is you telling people what they can expect from interacting with your product, with your brand. This will be seen in advertising most especially, and the idea is to tantalize them and to give them an understanding ahead of time of what you're all about, what the experience is going to be all about. Then there's the brand personality. This is one of my favorite pieces. I like to create a personality for the brand so that it's consistent, but also so that it's relatable, so that you don't feel so corporate, so that it feels more like a person that you're communicating with. The way we do it, Carl Jung, the psychoanalyst, a long way back, suggested that all people in the world can kind of be broken down and fit into 12 main personality archetypes. And he laid them out, as you can see in this chart here: jester, everyman, ruler, and so forth. Then in the 90s, two pioneers in my field said we could actually take Jung's archetypes and apply them to brands as well. And for the last 30 years, this is what we've been doing. You don't have to use one of these archetypes, but it does make the job a lot easier. And the way it works is that it's about what you want to express to people, but it's also about what your market is looking for. So for instance, a company like Jeep expresses itself as an explorer because they know that their market is looking for freedom. Harley Davidson is the classic example of a brand that expresses itself as an outlaw because their market's looking for liberation. Recently, that vegan cheese that I talked about, it's a very sensual product. And so we know that our market, for instance, is most likely going to identify with the lover archetype. So we expressed ourselves as a lover personality in order to make that subtle connection. People will see and read and hear the messages coming from that brand. And the people who fit in that category are going to be like, I don't even know why, but this speaks to me. So this is how the brand personality can really work for you. Part of that brand personality then is the tone of voice. It's like how you speak, what you're going to say, what's the mood of it. And so that can be very, very important. So here you can see how we defined it for one of our clients, what the tone of voice should be: light, funny, open-spirited, and so on. And then the brand story. This is key. This is one of my favorite parts. It's also one of the hardest parts. This is where you take everything, your big sales pitch, and you really boil it down to its pure essence. This is your company's elevator pitch. It can be really hard to really distill it into just this, but it's incredibly effective in communicating what you're all about. So this is the brand story for Vivo, for instance. And it took a whole team about 3 months to get everything down into this clear, concise package that had everything that we needed to say and nothing we didn't want to say. Part of creating a brand story is also about who your audience is and what they need to hear too. So when everybody first came in and we started this presentation, I could have said, hi, I'm Sunil, and I love dogs, or I could have said, I love to sing off key. Instead, what I said was, I help food companies connect to their markets so that they sell better. Those other things, the dogs and the singing, that's true too. Because, all of us, we're very complicated people. We have a lot of different facets. But what I did is I boiled it down into the thing that my audience, all of you, needed to hear so that I could catch your attention. So that's how a brand story works. You boil it all down into a message tailored for who your market is so that you can hook their attention. So if this is the elevator pitch, then Terry O'Reilly, you've probably heard him on the radio, he talks about an escalator pitch. Instead of 30 seconds, imagine like two people and they're on different escalators going in different directions. And you've got just like 3 words to express everything that you're about. That's your tagline. So you've got to boil everything even further down into a tagline, which is really, really hard to do. Here's an example of a tagline that I created for a client 2 years ago. We took everything we had done for them and brought it down into ethical comfort food. So those are some of the major pieces that go together to make a brand. But what do you do with all of that? Once you have it, once you've got your tagline and your brand story and all of that, you put it all together into your brand story. So it comes across in, for instance, your social media. You take your tone of voice, you take the personality, you take all the things that we've defined your brand as being about, and you express it here in the colors you use, in the types of photos that you choose, in the words that you say. It'll also be used in outdoor advertising. This is an outdoor billboard that we created for Libra, and one that we did for Vivo. And also, say, print ads. All of the brand will always be expressed in every single one of these points, so that when people see anything that your company has made, they get what you're about. You're always going to stay consistent and true to this personality that you've created, so that people will understand and feel that emotional connection. And then finally, when all of that is done, you express the same thing again through your packaging. So the graphic design, then, all of that is actually just going to come from everything that you've already created on your brand. And that's how, in this crowded marketplace, you capture people's attention, and that's how you make that connection, so that you don't have to worry about a person not seeing that product on a shelf. You've already reached to them, and when they see it, they feel something, and they're happy, and they reach for it, and they buy it. And that's how you stay in the 20% that succeed. Thank you very much. I'm going to hand it over now to Emily, who I think has some comments to close.
Thank you so much, Sunil. That was amazing. We do have some time here for some questions. So if you do have any questions for Sunil, please use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. We're happy to stick around and answer some questions. Thank you, Sunil, for presenting today and teaching us all about how important it is that that package you put on the shelf is beautiful. We will answer questions, and I don't think any have popped in yet, so we'll wait a few minutes. But Sunil, they're perfect. If you would like to reach out to Sunil or I directly after this webinar, our contact information is on the screen. So please don't hesitate to get in contact with either of us if you're interested in anything Sunil has shared today, or our services at Prenny as well, and our Food and Beverage Business Accelerator program. I think you must have just really, oh, here we go. We have a question. I was going to say you must have just answered everything. So our first question here, Sunil, is could you mention a little bit about how to keep the brand consistent over time?
Yeah. So one of the things is that the people, when they create the brand, should create a guiding document, and it should be quite thorough, not just with the graphic elements, but all of the other things that I talked about, like the brand story, the mission statement, the tone of voice, all of those things. So whomever is creating new things for you should always have that guide and should always refer back to it. If you're of a certain size, you're going to want to hire a brand manager who would know that guide inside and out, and has probably been involved with the creation of the brand and will always be checking. Now, you asked about over time. I would say the time frame for a brand to remain consistent is about 3 years. Then the market's going to start to change. The market's going to start to push you in different directions, and you're going to want to do a pivot at about 3 years, sometimes at 2 years. And then at 5 years, you're going to want to look at a brand refresh. So there's your window for how long you want to keep it. And you're going to keep it that way by making sure that the people that create your brand give you a very strong, like a brand Bible that you can always refer other people to.
That was a great answer. Questions have flooded in, so I'm just going to keep going through them. So we have another one here of, I'm having trouble with finding a label applicator for a tapered container. What are your thoughts about straying from a package shape that is traditionally associated with a product, such as a pint of ice cream?
Yeah, that can be really tricky. The part of what you want with a package is something new, so it captures people's eyes. But part of what you really strongly need is the familiarity. When you're in a crowded shelf, especially something like ice cream, where you've got a frosted window in front of you, you need people to look at it and be like, "That's ice cream." You don't want them to ever be confused that it's something else. You've got some leeway. Um, but you've got some leeway because you're in that freezer with other ice creams. So you can, for instance, sometimes go with a box, go with a slightly different shape. But if you go too far, people won't see it. One of the examples is one of the major orange juice companies changed their graphics completely and sales plummeted. It was a beautiful design, but people just didn't recognize it anymore and they couldn't find it. So you shouldn't go too far. But it's too bad with the label. Maybe reach out to me after this and we can talk about it because there could be some, I might know somebody who could help you on that one.
Thank you for that, Sunil. The next question is, what are some key considerations to set parameters for developing a label, image, and tagline?
Sorry, a label image and tagline?
Yeah, so developing the label, image, and tagline, what would be key considerations for setting some parameters?
I'm not sure I understand that. If we're talking about like the graphics and how you develop the graphics, I would say it's exactly the process that I talked about here, where you develop the brand first. Like, who's your market? What makes you different? How are you going to create a story around that to get their attention? And how do you distill that down? And once you've done that, the tagline should come from that. The tagline should be a distilled version of your brand story. For the label, if we're not talking about the technical side of it, if we're talking about the graphics, it should also come from your brand. So for instance, if it's decided that you need to look like a luxury brand, maybe you want to go with colors, a design that expresses luxury. Like maybe you want to be have it in black, for instance. If you're going to be, it's a very healthy, natural, vegan product, maybe you want to look at something that's like white or slight off-white or green to express that. But it should all come out of the brand. Like once the brand is established with all of those things that I talked about, the design decisions are almost all usually made for you. You don't have that much leeway anymore. You'll know what you need to do. I hope that answered your question.
You did interpret it right. They followed up and said that graphics was what they were talking about.
Okay.
So the next question is, if you are in a niche market, for example, specialty coffee, how do you build brand awareness? And they added on, I'm selling non-traditional coffee blends that are not commonly consumed in the North American market. They're like a Turkish or Arabic coffee.
Okay, so there's two ways that, no, sorry, I'll say there's three ways that you can do this. You can put it out there on the shelf and build word of mouth and organic awareness very slowly. That takes 3 to 5 years though, and it can be very tricky and it can be hard to keep your product on shelves in the beginning because grocery stores are gonna be like, you're just not getting the volume, we're gonna put something else in. The second way is via social media, which nowadays is very accessible. You can put ads on Instagram, on Facebook. It's not even that expensive anymore. And you can build and you can send samples out to influencers if you know who those people are, the people who are likely to be evangelists for your product. So that's the second way. And then the third way, which requires a budget, is you get a PR company. And the PR company is going to have a list of who the people are that will evangelize your product, and they're going to send the samples. And you'll create a special kit for influencers, and you send them those free samples. And you reach out to reporters, and you'll have advertising. Can be a lot more expensive, but it depends on your size and how much funding you have. But I would say the second option, the social media and reaching out to influencers can really work on a small budget. And that third option of getting a PR agency really works when you have a big budget. That first option, though, of just like organically letting it grow is not a great solution. So those are your three options, I think, for building market awareness.
Influencer is a really good suggestion.
Mm.
The next question here is building a strong brand is important to grab a consumer's attention in those few seconds on the shelf. How is the trend of new types of packaging affecting this, such as more popular flexible pouches that are emerging quickly?
Interesting question. I don't know that. I haven't seen any studies that are correlating, say, brand awareness and brand affinity with the packaging structure. I think that oftentimes having an unusual package can capture people's attention, but I think that all of that is usually superseded by having a good brand, like having an ad that connects with people, that makes them feel something and makes them laugh and smile, is going to have a much more pronounced effect on your sales than the type of pouch that you're actually using. If you're in, say, specialty stores and say you have a market maybe who's largely vegan, and you don't, for instance, have a compostable pouch, that can be problematic. But there are usually compostable pouch options nowadays. So that's about the only point where I would say that I've seen data where the specific type of material you're using on your packaging really has an impact that's larger than the sort of impact that you're seeing from having a compelling brand.
That's a really good point. I know a lot of people are looking for sustainability, especially in the packaging, and want it to be at least recyclable these days. So
yeah.
The next question here is, what if you have an existing product, but based on research, it's missing the mark, or the market has shifted? How do you change but not alienate your current customers?
Yeah, so I would say half of my clients are exactly in that position. You know, they've launched, they're usually maybe about 2 or 3 years out, and the market's changed. I mean, the whole world has changed. Not alienating your customers means keeping a certain percentage of what you already have in existence, but at the same time figuring out what it is that you need to add in to connect with your new market. But to be perfectly frank, sometimes you just have to say, look, the brand's not working. The people who are loyal to us because they like the product. And we can change the brand and get a whole new market. But because we're keeping our product the same, we're not going to lose the people that we've already had. So that's what I did with Vivo, for instance. We didn't lose those old customers, even though we've changed everything in the brand. But all the old customers have stayed loyal because they weren't loyal for that old brand. They were loyal for the product itself.
Vivo is a good example because, yeah, they rebranded fully from those glass bottles now to the slim cans.
Cans, yeah.
Yeah. So their old customers are still finding them on the shelves, even though it's a totally different package.
Yeah, that's it.
So the next question is here, and we do have some more time. So if you have any other questions, please put them in now. But the last question here is there a marketing technique or label ad, like advertising attribute, that consumers simply cannot resist paying attention to?
Is there an advertising technique that consumers cannot resist paying attention to? You know what? Honestly, I don't think so nowadays. I mean, everybody's different. There's no one magic bullet on that one. And we are all so good now at ignoring extra signals. You know, we're also used to just glossing over ads. Still, the most effective is something with bright colors, motion, contrast. So like a short video that comes up on Pinterest or Instagram is definitely going to have a better chance of grabbing people's attention, but there aren't any guarantees. Targeting your ads is going to be a more effective approach, I think. That is to say, knowing who your market is and then making sure that you're getting the ad in front of them so that they're already predisposed to want to listen to your message. That's not necessarily a silver bullet, but that's much more likely going to succeed for you.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Sunil. No other questions came in, so I think we'll move on to that next slide there.
Seeing a lot in the chat, though. Is that
I got those as well.
Okay, perfect.
So thank you for presenting today and teaching us about the package. Our next webinar is on March 9th with Peter Chapman. I just put the link to register in the chat, and he's going to be talking about how the pandemic is shaping food and beverage. We're going to dive into trends that maybe came up through the pandemic, but they're also going to stick around. So this webinar is also supported by the Food and Beverage Business Accelerator Program, which means it's free to attend. Please register in that link in the chat, and we hope to see you then. Other than that, I think we're good to go. So if you have anything else you'd like to say, Sunil, feel free.
Thank you, everybody, for coming. I really appreciate it. I know it's the middle of the afternoon, and I'm really happy that you were all here. Thanks so much. And thank you, Emily, for giving me that chance to talk. I appreciate that too.
You're welcome. I really enjoyed it. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.